So my name is Leah Bolger. I joined the Navy when I was 2 years out of college in 1980. In 1980, women couldn't be in any kind of combatant situations or billets, so we were kind of tossed in, women officers were kind of tossed in this catch-all category, general unrestricted line officer. So I was a line officer, but I did various jobs that were not combatant. I joined the military really because I needed a job. I was a fine arts major in college, and I worked at a grocery store to put myself through school. And I didn't really think about how I was going to earn a living. And then one day I was mopping out the checks down at Safeway and thinking, what's wrong with this picture? You know, I have a degree and I'm mopping, and you know, you also have to know that I grew up in this small town, Warrensburg, Missouri, which is about 10 miles away from Whiteman Air Force Base. It's in the middle of not very culturally savvy area. And we moved to Warrensburg from Kansas City when I was a freshman in high school. And so I went to high school there, and then I went to college in this same little town. And Warrensburg, Missouri, and Central Missouri State University, home of the Fighting Mules, if you've heard of us. So, yeah. So, you know, by the time I had been through high school and college in this town of 13,000, you can imagine, and you think back to when you were a teenager, and then early 20s, I wanted out of this little podunk town in the worst way. And anyway, it's kind of a long story, but I thought I wanted to go back to grad school. I thought I wanted to be a teacher. It turns out I didn't get into the grad school I wanted, and when I hung up the phone after talking to the admissions people, yay! Okay. If you will just, yeah, go on to the next slide. So as I mentioned, I joined in 1980. I never intended to spend a full career in the military, but it was interesting. I spent, you know, I was stationed all over the world. Every tour was a little bit different. I was out of that little podunk town, and so I ended up spending 20 years. And without really giving a lot of thought to what I was supporting and what I was doing. It was really a job. It was interesting. It was in the middle of the Cold War, and I didn't feel like I was killing anybody. It wasn't like, you know, today where we're in a hot war shooting at folks. So I just, you know, I did my job, and I got through it, and pretty soon I was to 10 years, and I thought, well, I'd be stupid to get out now because I'm halfway to retirement age. So I stuck around, and I got out. I retired when I was 42, and now I'm a full-time peace activist and able to live on my pension. And so thank you, taxpayers, for letting me. That's right. So often I am asked, what transformed you from a warrior to a peacemaker? And I was never a warrior. I was in the military for 20 years. And most people in the military don't end up shooting or being in combat. There's so many support people, especially in times of peace. So I would never think of myself as a warrior. But I did transform from a kind of unknowing, ignorant, indifferent to foreign policy person to one who became more aware, and that was my transformation. I was always sort of out of place in the military. I always thought that don't ask, don't tell was stupid, and I get into arguments with people about that. When I was a student at the Naval War College, I wrote papers on war termination and the importance of the UN, and those ideas were not especially popular. So I was always kind of left-leaning, but not enough to really do anything about it or be an active peace organizer. So my pivotal moment where I turned from kind of indifferent, apathetic to active was at this exhibit, the Eyes Wide Open exhibit that was sponsored by American Friends Service Committee, AFSC, and this was in Eugene. And I saw these rows of boots that are lined up as if they were tombstones at Arlington. And I had a visceral reaction to this exhibit. It just was like a kick in the gut, and I was so upset. And then you see the civilian shoes for an Iraqi child. And after I left this exhibit, is when I really started getting involved.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
So are those all military boots?
These are all American military boots, right.
What do they say on each one?
The tags, it's like this. It identifies the soldier to whom it belonged, and these represent actual military deaths. And sometimes there's dog tags or other personal memorabilia that the family has given. So the shoes is a real way of humanizing it more than if it were just a marker. But the human touch of the shoes, it just was devastating to see that. And then what I really appreciated about this exhibit was it was not just about American fatalities, and they represented the children and the innocent people in Iraq that we are responsible for killing. And they had big panels with information, and it was eyes wide open. I mean, you have to see it. You know, you have to see it. So,
you saw that. It's powerful.
Very, very powerful.
What year was this?
This was, I think, 2005.
Okay, so it's after you left the military.
Oh yes, yeah. After I left the military, my husband and I retired on the same day. We sold all our belongings. We lived on a sailboat for a few years, and then we moved to a little RV, and we land cruised for a few years. I wasn't engaged at all, you know, in politics or foreign policy or activism at all until we settled down in 2004 and moved to Corvallis. So yeah. So with VFP, I joined VFP. I don't really remember how I heard about it, but I joined it, and I was an at-large member. At the time, there was only one chapter in Oregon, and that was the Portland chapter, Chapter 72. And I was at an event where I was getting signatures for something. It was some kind of peace event, and there was a fellow there from that Portland chapter, and he saw my T-shirt, and he said, "Leah, you know, you should get your own chapter going." And I thought, well, okay, you know. And so I got. You have to have 10 people, 10 veterans to form a chapter. I found the veterans, and it's kind of a little funny story about how I did that. It's, you know, men of a certain age, a lot of them are World War II or Korea veterans. And so one day I was having lunch in a fast food restaurant, and I saw a group of men sitting there around this table, and one of them had a copy of The Nation magazine, and I thought, ooh, he's reading The Nation. He's probably a progressive guy. So I just walked up to these fellas and I said, "Hi guys, you know, are you any of you veterans?" And almost every one of them was, and that they were, I think, 4 or 5 of our charter group was from that lunch counter, but I'm normally not quite so bold. So I formed the chapter. I served as president for 3 years, and then I was elected to the National Board of Directors, and I served as the vice president for 2 or 3 years, and then this year I was reelected to the board, and now I am the president, the national president of the whole shebang. So, slide. So Veterans for Peace was founded in 1985 by this gentleman, Jerry Genesio, and his wife. His wife was not a veteran, and that's important to know later when I talk about our membership. They had been on a Witness for Peace mission to Nicaragua, and they came back and they were presenting their story, what had happened to them at a Unitarian church, and he met somebody who said, "Oh, you know, we should form a group," and they got together and decided to form their own organization. And Jerry describes it as the idea was to build, make a bridge between the veterans organizations and the peace groups. And this was, he's a Vietnam vet, and that was the idea, to try to find a common group. So this is our statement of purpose. And we're going to have another slide where we talk about the statement of purpose of Veterans for Peace. But basically, it's a 5-part statement. And I think most people in this room, I bet most of you will could agree with most of the tenets of our statement of purpose. And this is almost the same statement of purpose that Jerry and the others put together in 1985. It's changed a little bit since then, but this is our statement of purpose. Go ahead. So our organizational structure, we have a small office in St. Louis, Missouri. It is in St. Louis, Missouri because the guy that was willing to be our executive director lived in St. Louis, Missouri. And it's a very economical place to have a headquarters. Our rent is quite cheap. And but you kind of get what you pay for too. I mean, it's in the middle of the country, but it's not in the middle of change organization. You know, there's not a lot of stuff going on there, but that's where it is. And we have a very small staff. We have executive director, and we have some admin folks. But the work of leading the organization is done by a volunteer board of directors. We have 13 directors, and the directors choose they vote on the leadership. So out of the 13, 4 of us are the officers, and we elect new officers every year. We serve for 3-year terms, and then a maximum of 2 terms total, back to back, and then you can run again after a while. We have about 150 chapters in 48 states, including 3 chapters in Alaska and 1 in Hawaii. The only 2 states that we don't have chapters in, you might not guess, but South Dakota and Nebraska, for some reason, we don't have chapters there. But you know, there are veterans everywhere, so I think we have potential to build chapters in lots of places. We've recently expanded to have an international outreach. We've had a chapter in Vietnam for some time that are expatriates that were stationed in Vietnam, and they've built a friendship village, and they do a lot of Agent Orange reparation work and really very heartwarming work. So there's that chapter, but the newest thing is that we've developed a group of British fellows that most of them were resistors against the Iraq or Afghanistan wars, and they refused to fight in the British Army, and they have formed a chapter of Veterans for Peace in the UK. So I think that's very cool. A lot of our work is done with working groups and committees, and one of the things I think is it's a plus and a minus. The way our structure is with this volunteer board and national staff, this is referred to as national. If people in chapters will say national did this, or national, or you need to send it to national. Well, there is this notion that national is doing all kinds of things, and we're not. I mean, we're the directors. There's 13 of us. We're all over the country. We meet monthly by conference call, try to discuss things, but we, in my mind, need to be more leaderly and providing more coordination and guidance so that we are working in cooperation and everybody's on the same page. The way it is now, and I think this is to our detriment, I mean, it's great that we have 150 chapters and they're autonomous and they can do what they want as long as it falls within our statement of purpose. However, sometimes it's as if we have 150 different organizations. And this group is working on PTSD and another group's working on depleted uranium. And what if both groups are working on both things? You know, so we're not realizing our full potential, I think, because we are all these different chapters. So next slide. So here's where we are. We're all over the place, but not South Dakota or Nebraska. Okay.
But there is one in Wyoming?
Yeah, but it's a very small chapter. There's only a few people there, but there's a chapter there, yeah. And yeah, so membership, we have full members, which are veterans, and then we have associate members who are non-veterans, but they are active in the organization. We have honorary members. We have 4 honorary members, Philip Berrigan, Rachel Corey, Hetty Epstein, and Howard Zinn. Now, Howard Zinn was an active member, a full member of the Boston chapter until he died. Hetty Epstein is the only living honorary member we have, and she is a Holocaust survivor and has made she was on the boat to Gaza. She was very involved with that. And I think you all know the story of Rachel Corey and Philip Berrigan. Now, some notable, pardon me? Did I hear something? Okay. Some notable members. These 3 are full members. Danny Ellsberg, Ray McGovern, Ann Wright. You may have heard of some of those people. And then these are associate members of Veterans for Peace, Ralph Nader and David Swanson. You may know his writing. So go ahead. Okay, we're back to our statement of purpose. And the reason I brought it again, and this time you'll notice that 2 elements are in red and 1 is in blue. Right now, Veterans for Peace is working on trying to strategize and focus and develop a strategic plan and kind of prioritize where our work is going. And we have decided that this item E is really our overall goal, to abolish war as an instrument of national policy. That is what we are about, okay? And then we have decided to focus on these 2 elements as our objectives, our next level in our goals. These 2 elements, although they're important, this one is, there are a lot of other groups, nuclear weapons, anti-nuclear power, nuclear weapons groups, who can address this and are addressing this. And this is more of a humanitarian mission. This Seek Justice for Veterans portion of this statement is, in my mind, not at all what we should be doing. Veterans for Peace is not a veterans service organization. We are not the VFW, we're not the American Legion. We don't, that's not where our energies are focused. We want to end war. That's the primary thing. That's this focus. So these, if you decide you want to join us, this is where we're going to be focusing via these, in these 2 items. So, okay, go ahead. So this is my own personal little theory, I guess. I wrote an essay on this, and it was published a while back. But why should we end war? To me, there are 4 basic reasons. And the first one, it's immoral, should be enough. That should be the reason. It's immoral because of this picture, right? And to me, to talk about the other reasons is almost, I don't know. It's somehow wrong that is not reason enough for most people, but it's not. And you see that, we don't care. We're indifferent to the lives that we're taking, and we only seem to care about American lives. It's illegal. The Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan. It violates so many international laws, UN Charter, Geneva Conventions, Nuremberg Principles. It's illegal. It's ineffective. It rarely accomplishes what it sets out to do or what it says it sets out to do. And it costs too much. It costs way too much in money terms. And out of the 4, though, it seems as if the economic argument is starting to take up a little traction. And so, to me, I wish we would oppose war for the first reason, but whatever works, and if people are getting behind this idea of every dollar spent is taking away from what we really want, the human needs, or whatever reason, if they can identify with that, then let's go with that. Let's go with whatever is resonating with people. So the economic question is important. Go ahead. So our strategic planning. This is kind of what I see as Veterans for Peace's power. We are the only veterans organization calling for an end to war. There are other organizations that are against certain wars. But we're the only one that says it should be stopped. We want it, no war. That's it. We're opposed to all wars before they started, and we want to end them as soon as we can after. This is a picture of Joshua Shepard, who was right next to him was Scott Olson before he was hit with the tear gas canister. But you see how powerful it is when you have somebody in uniform, holding the flag. It's iconic. So we feel like our voices as veterans are, it's very hard to challenge them or to diminish them or to say, well, what do you know, So our stories, our experience, that is really the strength of the organization, our people, to explain whether you served in combat or not, and I was in the military for 20 years and I never saw combat, but I do understand how the military works and how it's integrated with the military industrial complex and all these things. So veterans do have an insight into the machine, and I think it's very important for us to speak out and with authority. Okay? So the big problem. As I mentioned, to me, it's when people say, why isn't the peace movement more effective, or what can we do? Well, it's not just ending one war. The problem is so big and so intertwined with military, with politicians, with Congress and elections. Media is huge, and it's very hard to know where to try to start unraveling this knot, because it's so tight. There's so many things that are all play on each other. So you can say, well, if we just got the right politicians in office, well, to get the politician in office, they have to take all this money, and the money comes with strings, and so we think, okay, campaign finance reform, that's what we need. Well, how do you even get that passed? Well, the people the stakeholders, the ones that can change it, don't want it to change. They're happy with the status quo. Yes, sir.
Maybe the fourth or the fifth vote should be, I guess, corporations, because like KBR.
Well, that's what military military industrial complex. And this is what President Eisenhower warned us against 50 years ago. So that's the corporation. That's the C part of that. The other thing is priorities. And what I mean by that is American priorities. What we say we want our money spent on, our federal budget, is quite different than what the Congress does. And they do not listen to our priorities. There has been a study by the University of Chicago every year for over 25 years, every year, that asks people, should we spend more money or less money on all these 22 different categories? And for the past 20 years, the number 1 and 2 priorities for the American people on where they want their tax money spent is what?
Education and healthcare.
Exactly right. Education and healthcare. This is what we've been saying for over 20 years. But it's not near the top. No. And guess where defense spending, it's number 18. And it's the first category that people say they want less money spent on. But and you've all seen the big pie chart that shows where our money is spent, and it's not following our priorities. So that's part of the big problem. Go ahead. So strategies to oppose war, amplifying veterans' voices. I think collaboration with other organizations is really critical, and Veterans for Peace certainly can't do it on our own. We've been around since 1985. We're recognized by the UN as an NGO. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, and we have a certain amount of power and leverage. We don't have a lobby arm. We're not a 501c4. We're not allowed to go to do direct lobbying. But we can work with other organizations who do, like FCNL. I didn't even write it down, but the American Friends Service Committee has their branch, the Friends Committee on National Legislation, that does lobbying. So in collaboration with these other groups, UNAC stands for United National Anti-War Coalition, and it is a coalition of well over 100 big groups and small groups that are working on, they're more of a mass mobilization type organization to bring people out in mass to stand up against war. And this one is also kind of a coalition. It's a New Priorities Network. And the focus of that is reprioritizing our budget, and what we want our money spent on is not what the government's spending it on. So it's the New Priorities Network. Yes, sir.
Well, I just thought of another organization you could collaborate with, and that's the Rotarians.
For credit.
Mm-hmm.
And the Rotary is really very committed to that.
Well, that's great. And you're right. And there's dozens of groups that we can work together in collaboration. I think it's important to find that. Peace through education, and education is critical. but it's not just enough to sit and talk amongst ourselves, you know, and we've got to risk something, I think. I organized a protest several years ago on the anniversary of the Iraq War, and I think it was the 5th anniversary, so it was some time ago. And I invited a couple to speak whose son had been killed in the war. And the story is so sad. He was in the National Guard. And he joined the National Guard because he was a cook in his civilian life. He was a chef. And he wanted to provide food services when natural disasters, and you know, he set up the kitchens, and that's what he thought he'd be good at. He joined the National Guard. He was a cook. His unit won awards for his cooking, and everything was great. And then he was called to active duty service in Iraq. Now, you know, he had no clue that he would have been called up. And at a certain point in our history, that would have been just absurd to even think about. You join and you remember the advertisements, you know, one week in a month, 2 weeks every summer, you know, and they show these guys getting extra money and they're just having a great time. Well, that's what the recruiters will tell you. Oh, it's just 1 week in a month, 2 weeks in the summer. And up until the Iraq War, it would have been unheard of to you know, be activating these people above the reserve forces. So all of a sudden, we've got guardsmen, and all our reserves are called up. And this fellow was in. They made him a machine gunner. They said, well, we don't need cooks in your unit because Halliburton does the cooking for us. We contract that out, and so we're going to make you a machine gunner. And they put him on the back of an unarmored Humvee, and he was killed within 2 weeks of being in Iraq. But the point of what I was trying to say is when his parents spoke, they said, they looked out, and we had a crowd of about 300 in Corvallis, which is significant, but they said, where is everybody? You know, every day I call, I march, I write, I protest, I vigil, and where is the outrage? Where are the people in the streets? And you know, I think what he was urging people to do is to step out of their comfort zone. And if you are somebody who, you know, you say, oh, isn't this war awful? And boy, I don't want to have war against Syria or Iran. Well, that's good that you're standing up and you're speaking your mind. But unless you do something about it, it's wasted. You have to be able, you have to, I think, push yourself out of what's comfortable. And so if maybe you've never, maybe all you've done is just tell your neighbor, boy, isn't this a bad idea to go to war? Well, so maybe you could write a letter to the editor and put your name on your opinion. Put your name in public and say, yes, this is what I believe, and I urge you to stand up. And if that's comfortable for you, then maybe you need to go stand on the corner with a sign and reveal yourself to the public that this is what I stand for. And if that's comfortable for you, maybe you need to go sit in your congressman's office. And if that's comfortable for you, maybe you need to get arrested. But you have to keep pushing, I think.
Again, the government has refused to have a draft, because if there were a draft, there'd be no war.
I've heard that argument, but we should not have a draft either. I mean, that's a really bad idea. So VFP in action, we've started off in the 80s. We were doing a lot more, I would say, humanitarian type things, evacuating hurt children from Bosnia and that kind of thing. We still do things like the Iraq Water Project, where we provide purification systems for Iraq water. We do counter-recruitment. We support war resistors. You know, all this thing. This is an interesting picture. You know, I mentioned we're not like the American Legion. In fact, the American Legion and VFW and some of those groups are really adversarial to us. And this is a picture of a 80-something-year-old gentleman who's in Chapter 9, the Boston chapter. And this is on Veterans Day, and the American Legion has a Veterans Day parade and would not let the Veterans for Peace group march with them. So they stood on the plaza where the march either began or ended, and they wore gags, and they were arrested. But they were arrested. And so this is what the sign, American Legion silences, messages of peace. And it's very common that we are dissuaded or banned from parades. It happens all the time. Okay, go ahead. This is Veterans Fast for Life, and this was in 1986, I believe. These 4 fellows, George, Mizo, Brian Wilson, a lot of people know Brian, and he lives in Portland now. This is Duncan Murphy, a World War II fellow, and Charles Lightke, who won the Congressional Medal of Honor, which is the highest medal you can get, and he notoriously returned it. He left it in front of the Vietnam Memorial. They had a Veterans Fast for Life in protest against the Contra, arming the Contras, and they fasted on the steps of the Capitol for 47 days. And really endangered their health, especially Duncan and George. So that's a very powerful action, fast, okay? Dave Klein, some of you may know him. He died some years ago, but he was kind of a real driver of Veterans for Peace for many years. And he was also a founder of Vietnam Veterans Against the War. That's Dave, okay? Arlington West, you may have heard of this, and down in Santa Barbara, I think is where it started, but they set up the crosses in the sand every Sunday, and they've been doing this now for many, many years, and they set it up as if they were Arlington Cemetery, and then this is a special occasion where they put the lights, and it's beautiful. But they, it's not, this is a tool or, it honors, of course, it honors the Americans who've died, but they have, this is a way to attract people in to talk about war in general. And they have lots of information about Iraqis killed and Afghans. And so it's kind of that way to bring people in who, if the memorial were just Americans, then Veterans for Peace wouldn't be supporting it. And if it were just for Iraqis, we wouldn't get the people to come look at it. So it's a very powerful exhibit. And we've done Arlington West type memorials all over the place. So this is, I show this slide with some trepidation. This is in Detroit, and this is an abandoned hotel, and we hung this banner. We also hung that war economy banner on some dilapidated housing projects that had been abandoned, and it just sad to see. This is outside the archives, archives building where the Constitution is inside. This is during the Bush era. This one, I'm a little nervous about putting this slide up, but I still would like to talk to you about it because this building here is the museum, and the words behind the banner are the First Amendment. And the museum is a private building that has exhibits about media and journalism and the press and all that. So a group of Veterans for Peace members went inside. They made up a copy of the War Crimes Times, this newspaper, and on the front, it had a picture of that hadn't happened yet. So they photoshopped it, and then it was really very clever how they had it planned out. They had people inside videotaping, and one guy, it starts out, and he's like a paper boy with a cap on. He says, "Extra, extra, read all about it. Veterans drop banner at museum." Then they dropped some inside the museum, and then outside we had guys on the roof. This is not the roof, but the plaza, open plaza area, and they dropped this huge banner, and it created quite a ruckus. It was not up for very long before the police had it taken down, but we got pictures out of it. Now we had some members that were very upset by this, and we had members who left the organization because they thought this was inappropriate, this sign. I think it's interesting to see, I mean, the point of this is that, yes, it's shocking to see the F word, big, really big, and it's not a word that I use very often at all, if ever. But to see it, and then to think to yourself, why is that shocking to me? War is the obscenity, and why am I not more outraged about killing that's being done in my name? So I think it was a very clever way to get people to think about what outrages them and what offends them. But we did have people leave the organization over it, and they thought that we did more harm than good. So I don't know. What do you all think about that?
I saw the video on YouTube. It got people's attention.
Yeah.
I like it.
I liked it too.
You can't get too strong.
Good. I'm glad to hear you say that. Good.
It is a little shocking to see at first, but then I think, my father was a veteran, and he talks about how frustrated he was. Most of the time he's in the military. They were just cursing all the time. So I look at them and think, yeah, it's veterans.
Yeah.
I
Right.
say that all the time in Ireland,
Yeah.
We should use that to recruit new members.
Well, and that's the other thing. We did gain new members. We had people who thought that was fantastic, and they joined us. So is there anybody here who thinks that this was a bad idea? Good.
Yeah, we'll still love you.
Okay. Well, I'm just curious because I'm still defending it. It comes up, and people go, "Oh, that banner still wasn't right," Cindy Sheehan. Cindy Sheehan became a well-known figure as a result. We were having a convention in Dallas, and I think it was 2004. 5? Was it 5? Okay. In the middle of the convention, Cindy says, she was going to be a guest speaker at the convention. She said, I'm going to go down, Bush is in Crawford, I'm going to go down there and ask him, for what noble cause did my son die? And so they got on this bus in the middle of the convention, and they drove down to Crawford, and they sent up Camp Casey, and you probably all know about that. So here's Cindy with some other VFP members, and we've had a long relationship with her for some time. Okay. This is a picture of, the 3 pictures from a protest we did outside the White House. There's Ray McGovern, there's Daniel Ellsberg, Chris Hedges, Dr. Margaret Flowers. I'm over here somewhere freezing my fingers off, lined up against the wall. This is Scott Olson right after he was hit. Go ahead. This is in Chicago recently at the NATO summit, and you can barely see, there's VFP flags, but we're there, yeah, okay. This is in 2007. I'm holding up a picture of Eric McKinley, who was a Corvallis citizen who was killed in Iraq, and I know his mom. And we were all carrying pictures of different soldiers that we were marching for, And I was, the police pulling me down in front of the Capitol building before. This is my most famous, situation recently. Is there any, I don't want to talk about it if everybody knows about it, but, okay, well, I wonder if we could show it.
Just remind all our guests that the manifestation of approval or disapproval, including cases, signs, or placards, is provided to the rules which do govern this committee. So
Further over.
Oops.
Just became really apparent that people's voice was not being heard, and I had an opportunity to tell these people what the American people really want.
the committee will be ordered, please.
Deficit. And all this obfuscation with percentages of GDP, this is just trying to confuse the issue.
The chair wishes to remind all of our guests that
want you to tax the rich in the war. We spend more on
I would request that the Capitol please restore order.
and there's history of this vast and grotesque spending on wars and the workmanship.
They shall recess until we are in order.
The face of this economy. We don't have enough money for housing and healthcare and everything that we want. We start spending our money in electoral.
Good on you, Leah.
Yes. You're great.
Get the truth out of there.
Just my 15 seconds of fame that's living on. Yeah. So anyway, I did a lot of interviews and stuff before my hearing, and I pled guilty because it's really silly to have a trial and say, I did that thing. But the judge, I think, was really quite sympathetic. He could have given me up to a year in jail. And he ended up giving me 60 days, but he suspended all the jail time. He gave me a $50 Victims of Violent Crime Fund assessment, and that is mandatory. Everybody who is guilty, found guilty or pleads guilty, has to pay something to the Victims of Violent Crime Fund, and that is a law, and $50 is the minimum. And he gave me 20 hours of community service, which I did for Veterans Peace that week while I was in D.C. And yes, the government. The government asked for what they call a stay-away order from the whole Capitol building, the whole Capitol grounds, all of the office buildings, and which is really quite common to be given a stay-away, especially from the building in which you interrupted. In that case, that would have been the Hart Senate office building. But the judge said, no, no, I'm not going to impose any stay-away, and I think Ms. Bolger has a right to participate in government, and so I didn't get any stay-away. I got the minimum. He gave me no fine at all, and I asked him for no fine. I said, yeah, I'll do jail time, but I'm not going to pay a fine, because I don't think that people should have to pay to have access to their Congress. And in essence, that's what we're doing. And in fact, I am the only citizen who was able to speak before the supercommittee. And my own representative couldn't speak to the supercommittee because it's all in secret. And so anyway, okay, next slide. Oh, it's an open hearing. It's a public. Hearings are open to the public, and they allow a certain amount of seats. Where in the back of the room, and it's a great big room. This hearing room is quite large. In the back is where the gallery is, and they have this velvet rope in front of it that you're not supposed to cross. And then there's these rows of media tables that you saw, and then in front of that is the witness table, and there's a few chairs behind them. And then they have the dais with all the the congressmen, senators, and so if you want a good seat, you just get there early, and they let in as many citizens as they will hold. So I really did not intend to interrupt that thing when I went in there, but the more I heard him saying these ridiculous things that had nothing to do with what we wanted, and what we've been marching for and saying. And I just stepped over that thing, and I just walked up to the front and told him. So I thought, oh, I'm never going to get an opportunity like this again, and I know that lots of people would do that if they had the opportunity, but most people would never get that opportunity. So I felt like, I can do this thing. This is the thing I can do, and so it was a little scary, but I'd do it again. So now this slide is something I'd like to kind of talk to a bit. Our organization is called Veterans for Peace, and in fact, we make a point of capitalizing the F in for, and because they really want to emphasize that we're for peace. However, our statement of purpose, as you remember, the overarching part of our statement of purpose is abolishment of war. That is anti-war, no war, anti-war. So to me, you can say you're for peace, but our overarching mission is to get rid of war. I mean, everybody would say, yes, I'm for peace. But as you know, building a culture of peace, and Mercy Corps is what I was thinking of. This is the culture. This is the kind of thinking in a global community. So I think for us to actually realize the abolishment of war, it's one thing to talk about how to end a war or the war, and the other thing to talk about how to end war in general, how to end that whole idea of war. And that is going to take all of these things. We're going to have to educate people. We're going to have to get our priorities straight. We have to stop thinking about other countries and being afraid of other people for no reason, and thinking that we're the best and everybody is, everything exists to serve us. And thinking as if we are a global community, and that what I do affects you, and that you are my sister, and you are my sister, and you are my brother, everywhere. And it's not just about Americans. It's not when you hear, oh, there was a plane accident in Peru. Were there any Americans on board? This is what you hear all the time. So I think we have to start thinking about terms of everybody affecting everyone, and valuing the lives of people in other countries as much as we do our own. And I contend that if, thousands and hundreds of thousands of Iraqi and Afghan children have been killed in these wars or as a result of sanctions, but if 10 American children were killed as a result of these conflicts, we would be rising up in outrage, and we would not let it happen. Well, but why is it that the American people, it's acceptable that Madeleine Albright is the one that said, well, yes, it was worth it. 500,000.
Kids get killed. If 10 white kids get killed, there would be all kinds of stuff.
Well, I think
10 black kids, no. I mean, it's our problem.
Well,
The victim,
I don't think it's race, but it's also jingoism. It's also Americans are first, and American lives are more valuable. And
it's not American. I'm as American as you are.
yes.
It would be the same if I was run down or killed on the street.
You both are right.
Yeah.
There's lots of, and you see that all the time with kidnapped children or whatever, and little white girls, pretty white girls that's big news for everybody, and it happens all the time with young black boys or black girls, and it's not news. I understand the racism in our culture, but what I'm saying is Americans we're not outraged that Afghan children are being killed. It's just like, well,
how can I be concerned about Afghan when I'm being killed here and you don't care about me? Not you personally. I have to defend myself. But how can I be concerned about Afghan when on the streets black people are being incarcerated and shot down and yeah.
Well, it doesn't have to be one or the other, does it?
It seemed like to me there must be other. It seemed to me that that's the way it is that we kind of accepted it. I mean, I don't think everyone, forgive me, I'm not saying everybody's that way, but the outrage only comes if you're Caucasian American of a lighter skin.
That's internal to the country. But if our African American soldiers are being killed, we're just as much, we count them equally with our white soldiers. It doesn't
Well, I look at
all.
NPR and I keep
But
saying,
certainly, yeah, internal to our country, we have you're right on all those issues.
Right.
Those are issues we fight domestically. But I think when we're fighting against war, we're pretty united.
I look at NPR and I think I love NPR because I get good news and I get things that help. But when they show the people who are slaughtered, and I know that somehow the numbers are very, very high in terms of minority community, African American, whatever, and people who were, I know the numbers are extremely high. But when I look at NPR, I think 2 or 3, maybe black or Asian looking people come off and all the rest are Caucasian. So I think, oh, it's only Caucasian getting killed. Why is that?
Well, what you're talking about is part of the big problem. I'm talking about media and corporation and bias and the people who control. I mean, we have so many problems, and they are all very much intertwined.
We are the people.
And what she's saying is that the VFP is a bunch of white people mostly, I'm just guessing, and that they don't work on racism. They should, if they're not going to work on racism to stop white racism, then they should just take a close look at themselves and why they're so worried about war. That is what I honestly believe. That's why we don't have as many black people in our local VFP chapters. They feel like, hey, first you fix the justice in this country, and then come and talk to me about war. I know that's out there. I happen to be anti-war. I know that there's injustice for black people. I'm me. I'm outraged by war because white guys who run the country are the ones who are doing war. And I'm a white guy, and I want to run the country too. And I don't think we should be killing people. And I know who those white guys are, and I'm on their case. They're the people who are running Boeing and all the people down on the bases down there. And I know who they are. I know that they're the bankers. The bankers are the ones who start all wars. So anyway, that's why, you're not the only person who's being treated unjustly either. There's a lot of you know, Native Americans, the immigrants,
I know,
everybody's
when I-
getting screwed.
When I speak, I'm speaking all people who are under pressure, that are basically minority people. I'm not saying that there is any one class or group, but there isn't the outrage, there isn't the concern. And so if you as a, I guess, majority voting people don't really realize what is going on, then you really don't have to talk about it. I know that unemployment in my community is probably still up to 15% among Africans. I can only go African American. I know that the same goes across the board. But white people's employment is down to, I think I heard 8 point something. And I thought, well, you really don't have to be unhappy. You know, you don't really have to shout about drug wars, and you don't have to shout about prison. You're okay. I have to read it, and I'm reading it from a different side of the track, and I realize that.
And all the old white guys in the VFP, most of them have paid off their mortgages. Most of them have a pension. Leah's got an income. Hey, how can they? They're not in the crosshairs, right? Personally, honestly, I don't know why we care, but we do. The thing is that we do care about the war. Thank God we care about anything. If I didn't care about the war, I probably wouldn't be any more likely to care about the Latinos or you or all the other people who are being screwed. At least I care about something, you know? That's why the thing about the working groups in the VFP, I don't think they should try to herd everybody into one tent. I think if they got some working groups that cares about Latinos or cares about race, they should just let those guys go off into their work group and go work on what they care about and stop trying to make them.
We have caucuses.
But anyway, I'm expanding the thing. I'm expanding the argument too much.
I think that ending war, abolishment of war, is a pretty lofty goal. And you know, I would love to end racism and poverty and all these things too, but because we have to really take advantage of our veterans' voice. This is what we specialize in, and this is what...
But you care about all of us.
Right.
Of course, I care about all of us. I care about, but the Veterans for Peace, our veterans' voices can speak about war and militarism with an authority and a credibility that the average civilian doesn't have.
And if they can bring that awareness up for people to where we do
So it's a
abolish
long
war
time
and
coming.
poverty, guess what happens to poverty?
It's a long time coming to those you're alive.
So,
Because you already know what it is. I mean, you know that there's power in the people. And you know that once the people organize and say, you know, we don't want this anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
We have to organize. What else are we going to do? I mean, we don't have the money. We can't fight them monetarily. We'll never have enough money to fight them. So we have ourselves. So we've got it.
I'm not a veteran, but I'm a member of KBOO Radio in Salem, which I get from Portland. And the third Friday of every month is Veterans Voice by Marvin, and I forget the other man's name. And they're Veterans for Peace. And so they give a veteran's perspective to me of what it is like to be a veteran. And they have a wide variety of topics. I heard a powerful one recently about the children of Vietnam vets who were exposed to Agent Orange. And these children, well, they're about my age now, or a little bit younger, have serious health defects. I mean, so there's, I heard about the bunker busters down in Monmouth that are helping connect vets to services. So I hear a lot about, I'm getting educated about the Veterans for Peace, which for me, I find that healthy and good.
Well, you know, you mentioned Agent Orange and the problems of American servicemen's progeny. Well, what about the Vietnamese children?
Right, yeah, they talk about that too.
Second, third, fourth generation having problems with it. Right. So, and we see this with depleted uranium. That's the Agent Orange of the current times. But Americans will be concerned about, they will ask about, and you'll see legislation for this too, testing soldiers to see if they were exposed to depleted uranium in case, you know, so they could be cautious about family planning and things like that if they've been exposed. What about the Iraqis? You know, we are the aggressors and we are responsible, and this is This is why I don't want to discuss, me personally, and my organization, and I'm saying this as me, Leah Bolger, I think it is so selfish, for lack of a better adjective, just to think about only Americans, American progeny, and American children, American PTSD, and American exposure to depleted uranium. We are the aggressors, and all the people that we have harmed were in their country, and we illegally invaded it, and we poisoned it, and it's not going away for 4 million years. And where is the outrage about that? No, and the birth defects that are coming out, just horrific. You can't even look at this. It's just so upsetting. So when I bring up depleted uranium to a politician, they'll say, "Oh yes, you know, we need to pass legislation to test our service members." No, we need to fucking stop bombing people with depleted uranium weapons and killing them. I mean, my God, it's just I get so mad about this. Oh well, Americans, and PTSD. What about these children? They're watching their parents being killed. They're hearing the drones overhead. They don't know when somebody's going to kick in their door at night. That's what we need to be outraged about, and it needs to stop. So, I mean, we have to stop thinking about Americans, and we're the victims here. And I get so angry about this.
Who kicks in whose door? Police is on there.
She wants you to change your campaign and work for social justice in the United States.
Is that what you're saying?
It's a different campaign, you know?
It's a different campaign.
Yeah.
It's talking about alcoholism, you know, or some other
Racial
campaign.
justice in America.
We're back down.
It's very hard. I really feel pain when I think of anybody being hurt in any way.
I think
And
that's
that
exactly what
doesn't
she's
matter.
saying. She's urging us to feel other people's pain the same as you are.
Right.
And I think that's the point, is we, all of us, need to feel everybody's pain.
Right.
Well, we need to say something about what is going on with those of us who are here.
Right.
I'm sorry, but that's what I'm saying. Those of us who are here, we need to find ways to speak about it. Because otherwise, on the other side of the track, it looks very different. And, you know, I grew up in the South, and I grew up where there was brutality and hanging on a fence and in the trees and strange fruits. You know, I grew up there, and my mom always said, in spite of what was, she talked about respect for human lives, respect for being treated with respect.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how do I have respect, great respect for somebody in another country when I'm still being, my door's still being kicked in or whatever? And young black men have been shot on the street. How do I do that? And do that with feeling and compassion. And so I think and I feel and I look and I say, this is very strange. Why do I feel this way? What is my thing? I am an American, and I do support Veterans for Peace. I give money to it, but I keep thinking, well, why is this? I mean, what is going on? You want me, I want to feel empathy for people all over the world. It's not just a black or a white thing. It's black, white, brown, whatever the spectrum is.
Right, and I think the point I'm making is that I think too many Americans think it's American thing, and that whatever we do is right. And well, I don't know, Obama's blatantly, challenging the law, or not challenging. He's just, he's just ignoring international law by waging wars of aggression. This is the highest international crime there is, a war of choice. So I don't think it's about race. No. I don't think.
The last bullet there, we got culture. We got a dysfunctional culture. And I think she's quite right. We have to also, at the same time, we're looking at compassion globally. We got to also take dysfunctional role. And
well, there is. I mean, there's
justice. There should be justice.
Absolutely, and I agree. I mean, I don't think. When was the last time we bombed a country where the people looked like us? That doesn't happen. I mean, I can't remember when, you know. Kosovo. But they were Muslim, right? So I think there is a huge race problem involved in there.
When we are concerned about the fatalities that our government is causing in other countries, we're living with the results of what our government did to our citizens during the Vietnam War. I taught in Chicago. All of my students were African Americans, and not one family was without someone either killed, suicide, or way into mental health problems. I mean, we do. We live with a deep concern for what we have done to our own people through our aggressive wars, as well as our concern for human beings all over the world.
Well, and I think, you know, with Occupy, people are starting to see the police brutality, and for the first time, white people are being hit over the head with clubs, and they're saying, you know, so I think people are starting to recognize problems, that kind of problem as well. I'm not denying there's a race problem in our country and in the world. I just think that's a different issue from what
I don't know how you can teach me to care about somebody else if you don't care about me.
I do care about you.
Not either or, it's both.
Right, it's both. Yeah.
Right, I do care about you, but Veterans for Peace, our veterans' voice is trying to speak out against something that we know, and that's war. You know, there's lots of groups that work, you know, I'm a member of SPLC too, and I'm a member of ACLU, and I'm a member of Planned Parenthood. I'm a member of lots of organizations that specialize in what they, you know, so do you get on Planned Parenthood and say, well, why aren't you doing more for, well, that's the point is, every group is specialized into what the
That may be a problem.
well, Aaron hasn't spoken.
No, just it's sorry, but there's something vet related that I've been struggling with since I came. The whole concept of nonviolence. I get it intuitively, and I want to be there 100%. And when I go back, I mean, I am a vet and was active in a lot of violence, and I think 99% of it was stupid and wrong, and we didn't have in Israel, we didn't have a Veterans for Peace, and now there is. I'm really grateful for that. But if I look historically, there's some cases where I don't see any out except for violence, and that's the thing I'm grappling with. I'm thinking about World War II. I don't know how the Nazis could have been stopped without violence, and so then I think if you needed violence to stop the Nazis. And once I make that step, and I'm totally comfortable with that, I don't know how you stop that slippery slope. Because I hear other people saying, well, if that, then what about the war on terror? If that, what about the Iranians and the nukes? And if that, then what about... How do you, how could the Nazis have been stopped without violence? And if not, where do you draw the line for absolute nonviolence?
Okay, well, I will tell you that Veterans for Peace believes that in our... Could you flip one more? I think it's on the next slide. Yeah, so this is you saw our statement of purpose, and then this follows our statement of purpose. And it says that we pledge to use nonviolent means to do our work, okay? And we urge you to join us, okay? So, but there are members of Veterans for Peace who would say there is such a thing as just war theory, that you're talking about, World War II, and that's the example most people come up with. Well, what about World War II? That was, yeah.
Small instances. I think, personally, had there been a more organized way of getting an action going, it probably could have worked. They were human too, you know, so there was always that option. But it wasn't possible to organize. I mean, just the whole way that came about, you know, and you can see it, history kind of repeating itself now, which is very frightening, but, you know, by the time it gets to that point where you have, you know, concentration camps and things like that, it is beyond the point, I think, where you can easily do nonviolence. Even Gandhi said, you know, that the amount of suffering it would have taken for a nonviolent movement at that point would have been really huge. I mean, because you would have had to have lots of people just sacrifice their lives.
Yeah.
But
And not willing.
But individually, in those cases, it does work against them. They're still human. And had there been organizations already in existence like now, today, you think about how many peace organizations are around the world who are practicing and learning nonviolent skills. We have a much better chance of having a nonviolent movement against something like that now than they had back then.
And if, you know, we don't know what would have happened if we had not entered the war. You know, we don't know what would have
happened to my family.
Right.
Okay, but how many millions of people died in fire bombings and in nuclear attacks? And how do you justify that? Those were innocent people. So so this is the idea that a war, you cannot justify the taking of innocent lives. And Howard Zinn has that very famous quote, "There's no flag large enough to cover the shame of killing innocent people." And no matter how, I mean, I don't know how you can weigh it and say, well, this life is more valuable and this life is less valuable, and this one has to be sacrificed to maybe save this one. I don't know. But
I don't see it as numbers of lives. I saw it as a force that if I look backwards, it was a force that had to be stopped. Nazism as energy had to be stopped.
Right, but could it have been stopped early on? Could it have been stopped after World War I? And when we saw Germany, I wasn't alive, but we saw Germany fall into the economic depression.
We don't get to live history backwards.
Right.
We only get to
So
live
can we
forward.
Can we stop now
That's what we have to
when
do.
Europe is falling, you know, economically in trouble? So I want to take a question in a different direction. The Vets for Peace, the Iraqi wars, the Iraq Vets for Peace groups.
Iraq Veterans Against the War?
Right. What are you seeing from the young people about, are they speaking out about the war? Are they not? I mean, it's a different group of people because they joined.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's good. I'm glad you brought that up. IVAW, Iraq Veterans Against the War, was kind of born out of Veterans for Peace at our convention in Boston. And they formed, and we were their fiscal sponsor for a number of years, and we supported them, and they did their conventions with us, and they were kind of like our little, we birthed them, sort of, you know? And they started out as, their membership requirements was anybody who served after 9/11. And they had a three-point plan: was in the war in Iraq, bring those people home, and take care of the health care for the soldiers and reparations for the Iraqi victims. And it was all about Iraq. Then Afghanistan got bigger and bigger. And you know Aaron Watada, you know the name Aaron Watada, right? He was willing to go to Afghanistan. So there was, at the time, there was not so much opposition to Afghanistan war, and there were a lot of people in IVAW who were not against Afghanistan war. So over the years, they developed a caucus within IVAW, the AVAW, and Afghanistan Veterans Against the War. And they did come out with a public statement saying that they are opposed to the Afghanistan war. They have been vocal in speaking out, and very notably in Chicago. The IVAW soldiers or service members led the march, and then they threw back their it was very powerful, right. Right. So, and they just speak out, and we still collaborate with them on issues and work with them. They're medals that they had won as a result of their campaigns in Afghanistan and NATO wars. However, IVAW is much more concerned. They don't have a blanket opposition to all war. They are case by case, and now they're on record as saying they're against Iraq, they're against Afghanistan. They have not come out and say we're against war on Iran or Syria or Pakistan or against drones, or they haven't done any of that. And they are more of a support organization for each other, and to have peers that know what it's like to have been stationed here or fought here or done these missions.
and they spend a lot of their time helping each other. They've got something called Operation Recovery. This is a campaign that they've got going on, trying to, the premise of the campaign is that soldiers have a right to heal, and that they're upset that soldiers are going on back-to-back deployments, and they have traumatic brain injuries, TBI, and they have PTSD, and they're on psychotropic drugs, and they're really not fit for duty, but they're being sent back into harm's way. Well, to me, the corollary of that is, well, if it's your first tour and you're healthy, then it's certainly fine to go into war, and I don't buy that. So that's sort of the difference between, they spend a good bit of time trying to get benefits and treat PTSD symptoms, and that's fine, it's all good, you know, that's where they're focused. VFP has a different focus, and yeah.
Yeah, this argument about whether some wars are justifiable or necessary I've heard that countless times in VFP meetings and discussions, as you have, I'm sure. And I haven't seen that ever to really end in significant division, because it's not necessary to resolve our into two camps, whether you're pacifist moral or whether you just, since every single war since World War II has not been self-defense, it's relatively easy to totally get on board the mission statement as it is to abolish wars. Another crucial point is that the U.S. is the most powerful, actually the only superpower, and if we can abolish war, we're in a position to abolish war. Nobody else really is in that position with the U.S. coming into their countries. Mm-hmm. And so it's an easy
one more slide.
To establish.
Why are we doing it? Yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So, and I want to share a quote too. I'm a librarian, sorry I don't have my source right in front of me, but this is from Joseph Goebbels, who was Hitler's big propagandist. Do you know that quote? He said, "This is our triumph. That in order to fight us, they have to become like us." Mm-hmm. So just think about that.
Gandhi said something similar.
Yes.
In order for us to win against the Nazis, we have to become like them.
If you want to, can you all read the quote on my shirt? This is Eisenhower, and when I spoke at the NATO summit, the protest, I mentioned this. You know, here's the guy that was the first supreme Allied commander of NATO, and he said, "I hate war." You know.
I didn't catch the whole
quote. Somebody read it out loud.
Yeah. I hate war, as only a soldier who has lived it can, as only one who has seen its brutality, its futility, and its stupidity.
Yeah. So he also said, I mean, Eisenhower made some very good points, and in fact, we have a chapter named after Eisenhower. So he talked about every gun that is made, every bomb that is in fact food taken from. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but he got that, and he was the one that talked about military-industrial complex. Yeah. So here you go. We have 9 chapters in Washington and 6 chapters in Oregon. So if there's not a chapter near you, I bet we could form one. So
I don't see Bellingham. It's up there.
Yeah, Bellingham. Oh, I'm not sure where Bellingham is, but there is one. We have one in there. In fact, our secretary. Yeah, Jean Marks is our secretary. So. Here's our website. You can go and you can join us online. We do ask for dues. Our annual dues are $40, and if that's too much for you, we have a supported rate of $25. And if that's too much for you, then that's fine. Just join us anyway and tell us that it's too difficult. And we really just want your energy. We want you to get you on our mailing list so that you hear about all the good work we're doing, and you can we can tap into your energies. And I really think that collaboratively is the only way we're going to be successful. We can't all do it alone, and we have to work together. So I'm sorry if how much time is there left? Or none at all?
10 minutes over.
Oh, I apologize. I'm a yacker. Oh, thank you.